Tonight I'm here to talk to you about mastering human design with astrology, in conjunction with the new updates that you've all heard about with body graph charts and the astro chart software that they now have available. I was lucky enough to do some testing of the Astro software, and the guys have done such a good job, or the team has done such a good job on it. So I'm really excited for everyone to get a taste of this. And I'm also really excited for all of the astrologers out there. If there's any astrologers here, let me know. I'm so excited for you to have access to this platform now, because there's just nothing like this in the astrology industry. And the platform makes it so easy to start making money, generating reports. Oh, I love Deborah. That's great, Tammy. I love Deborah. She's like the OG, the GOAT, greatest of all time. She's a really great astrologer. Victoria, I'm deepening my astrology studies to offer Astro with HD. Beautiful. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. You also study with Deborah. Amazing. That's what I'm going to chat to you about tonight, is the benefit of starting to weave astrology into your human design business or your human design reports. Because this is really what I like, how I've built my business is, it's really centered around my perspective on using both systems together. So we're going to get into that. All right, I'm going to share my screen. So I'll just, hold on, let me get that. That's not it. If you're just coming in, let me know in the chat. Let me know where you're from. Okay, here we go. Sorry, I'm always a bit clunky with Zoom. All right, so I have slides tonight. I'm a quad right in my human design, and sometimes I need the slides to keep me on track. And I will keep an eye on the chat as well as I'm going. Oh my goodness, so many people here. This is amazing. Good to see everyone. Okay, so mastering human design with astrology. So firstly, my name's Amy. So I am a 5/1 splenic projector with the channels of judgment, struggle, awakening, and acceptance. I'm also, in my personality chart, I'm a Cancer sun, Pisces moon, and Leo rising. In my design chart, I'm an Aries sun, Scorpio moon, and Cancer rising. This is something that I think once you start getting into the astro, if you start learning this, looking at the design chart through the astro lens is really, really interesting. For me, learning that I was an Aries sun and a Scorpio moon was in my design chart was really, really affirming for some of the more fiery, like passionate parts of myself. Whereas in my personality chart, I'm very watery, Cancer sun, Pisces moon. And so I've worked professionally as an astrologer and a human design coach since 2018. And like I was saying before, I primarily built my business on, and my reputation in the industry on my ability to weave both of these systems together. I actually was studying astrology. I was finishing my astrology studies when I found human design. And for me, human design was like the missing piece in my journey, like learning that I was a projector. It changed so much for me, and it was very affirming for me in a way that astrology hadn't been before that. And so for me, as soon as I found human design, though, it's like I could see how I think I understood it really easily because of it being based on astrology. I felt like I just kind of got it because I had that knowledge of astrology beforehand. But also when I found human design, I could see like how beautifully it would sync in with astrology. And I could see how the systems were very complementary, but I could also really see how they were very, very different as well. So from the beginning of my business and the way that I work with clients is that I think I've really, really seen, and I have the evidence for how beneficial both systems are in that they work together really nicely, but also they give us different information in a lot of ways as well. And that's just been like repeatedly reinforced for me over the years. There's so much value to both systems. And I now teach both systems, and I teach people how to weave them together. And it's like I'm not someone who thinks one system is superior to the other at all. I think they both can show us really helpful and practical and interesting things that we can use with our clients. So yeah, I love them both. They're like my children. It's like you could never choose having like a favorite child, right? Like that's how I feel about astrology and human design. But the way I weave them together and the way that I teach my students to weave them together is that I use human design as like the foundation in my readings. It's why we did our human design reports came first. Like human design is the foundation, and then I weave astrology in over the top. And I use astrology to help provide greater nuance, more context, sort of, I find weaving astrology over the top, it gives me like a broader perspective on who a person is and what they might be moving through in their life. So I wanted to touch a little bit on the history of astrology too, because I think this is really interesting, because I know a lot of people here are probably coming from more of a human design background. And the two systems couldn't be more different in the way that they've come to us and the way that they've been developed. And so when we think of astrology, astrology is an ancient wisdom teaching. It's a mystical science. I think of it as an art form and a language. It's this language. You're learning to speak the language of the stars when you learn astrology. And so it's this tool that we as humans, we've developed. We've developed this over thousands of years as a way to help us understand ourselves, as a way to help us understand the world around us. And so in really simple terms, astrology tracks the placements of the planets, the celestial bodies, the luminaries, the asteroids, and also we use mathematical points in astrology. So astrology tracks their placement in relationship to each other and then their location within the zodiac. Like I said, astrology has been around for thousands of years. So we can go back about 4,000 years. We have evidence going back to about 2000 BC for like the development of astrology, but there is evidence going back as far as 25,000 years with cave markings, with indigenous cultures tracking the cycles of the moon. So, it's something that has been here for a long time, and we as humans have used for a long, long time. It changed a lot, astrology, around 400 to 600 AD, where it became more personal. Prior to that, astrology was really more of a collective type experience. The type of astrology that was practiced before then is what we call mundane astrology, which is more about the astrology of like a kingdom or the astrology of like a group of peoples. And it was primarily kings and queens and leaders and emperors who used that. And so then it changed around 400 to 600 AD, and it became more about like the personal horoscope. Who am I? What am I doing in this world? How do I get to know myself a little bit more? And so this is one of like the main differences, though, that I think it's important to know. And like that these two systems have come to us in such a different way. So human design was received. It was received by Ra as a complete comprehensive system. I know there are people who have developed it and added to it and done all sorts of things with it. But essentially it was sort of given to him, right? He received it as a complete, whereas astrology, in contrast, and this is one of the things I do really like about astrology, is that it's been developed over thousands of years of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of astrologers and astronomers collecting data. So it's something that's developed over time. It's a system that continues to evolve as we have more data. So it's been this real gradual evolution with astrology. And this is why you see in astrology, there are so many different types of calculations and so many different house systems, and people will have different opinions on things and people will have different interpretations of things, right? It's a system that is way more open to your intuitive interpretation, more so than human design is, because there's so many different ways and perspectives that we can bring to astrology. And so the way I see the two systems kind of differing as well, and like how are they helping us in a practical way, is that human design is this really incredible system for understanding like your energetic blueprint, your energetic operating system, your behavioral mechanics. Like it gives you this map, right? This map of like, how does my energy work? How do I engage with the world? How do I make decisions? What's the role I'm playing? And so it's incredible for that reason. But astrology, and especially when layered on top of human design, it gives us a much deeper perspective into a person's personality. It gives us a much deeper perspective on even the way a person will move through the world or the pace in which they will move through the world. And it gives us a much broader perspective into the world around you. So this is how I often will explain it to clients, and that, your human design, we get a real sense of you and your energy field and what's going on with you. With your astrology, I can actually get a really good idea around like what your childhood was like. I can get a much deeper sense of things to do with your work and your career. I can get a much deeper sense of even things to do. Oh, is my speaker still working? So I just got a thing. Yeah, things to do with money and finances, so it's like astrology really broadens the scope. Thank you. It really broadens the scope so we can see a lot more, and we can get a real sense of not just what is going on with you, but we can get a real sense of like, but what's also happening in the world around you that influences your experience. It influences the way that you move through the world. So this is what I'm going to focus on tonight, is like the real benefit in weaving astrology with human design, or that you get with astrology, is this greater nuance and the potential for deeper self-awareness, whether that's of yourself or of your clients or the people around you. And then it also gives us so much more context and a much broader scope of your life. You can, when you understand astrology, you really do understand so much about a person. You can see a lot more that happens beyond the chart. When you're looking at someone's human design chart, you can see the potential for dysfunction, right? You can see the potential for their not self, but you don't ever really know what conditioning a person went through. You don't ever really know what the family environment was like. You don't get so much of a sense of that, right? You're kind of making assumptions based on, well, this is the pattern I see, particularly of the not self. This is the pattern that I see that could be there, but then we don't know what's been going on, right? And this is where astrology really helps, in that you can explore someone's not self through the lens of their human design, but then also have all this other context of like, oh, okay, well, I can see with what happened at 7 years old, or what happened at 11 years old, or what happened with your family or with your neighbor. Like you can get a real sense of like all those other things that contribute to a person's conditioning and contribute to that not self dysfunction. So it's just the context we get is so much broader with astrology. And so I wanted to touch on a few of these things, and let me know in the chat if you're someone who does human design readings, especially let me know in the chat if this has ever come up for you. But especially this first one, this used to come up for me a lot. I've talked people through this a lot, and I found that their astrology is usually the reason why. So what I'm talking about is an example that I have here is like, where astrology can be helpful is, if a client doesn't resonate with their energy type, I've worked with a lot of people over the years who are Mani-Gens who said, but I feel like a generator. I think I'm a generator. Or with generators who said, but I feel like I'm a Mani-Gen. Or with manifestors who are like, I just don't resonate with like the traditional descriptions of a manifester, right? And what I have found is that it's often there's things in their astrology that kind of can help us make sense of that and understand why. And this is where, again, you get that deeper context and that deeper nuance into, well, like, yeah, you're a manifester, but you're a manifester with a dominance of fixed energy. So you're not going to be your urges aren't likely to come through with the same speed as a manifester who has a lot of cardinal energy, for example. So yeah, I have found like that piece to be really, really interesting when someone doesn't resonate. It also adds this subtle difference, right? This is kind of what I'm talking about, but this subtle difference to the way a person will engage with the world around them, and it's, yeah, I think I think combining the two, it can actually really help those people who might otherwise, sorry, my phone, some people, they come in and they learn about their human design and they think, oh, but I just don't resonate with being a Mani-Gen. I think I'm a generator. They might then think, well, this has no value for me. They might come in and think, well, human design doesn't resonate with me, right? And so if you have this context, if you bring in the astrology, there's a really good chance that you can talk them through that, and then they can still find the value and the benefit in human design as well, and not kind of write off the system. And so yeah, so that's like a really big point, like a really big way that astrology helps, especially you might not know what this means, but especially when you start to look at like the modalities of the signs, even like if you don't get as deep as like the zodiac signs, but understanding the cardinal, the fixed and the mutable signs, like they really do, especially if it's in someone's incarnation cross, because most people have their incarnation cross in the same modality because it's that 88 degrees, right? So you'll get some people who have a mixture, you'll get some people who have a mixture, but most people have the same modality. So yeah, anyway, it can be really, really helpful. Yeah, modality is really important. And so then, like I was saying before, we get this greater context as well, and so with someone's astrology, we can, you get a pretty good sense of like what someone's childhood was like. You get a pretty good sense of like where their big trauma, dysfunction has kind of happened in life, and that can be really, really helpful when you're having discussions about the not self. I find that can be a really, really interesting part to weave into that conversation, because yeah, oftentimes like that dysfunction kind of it because everything touches everything, right? Like this is what we learn in human design, like nothing exists in a vacuum, everything touches everything. And so that's the way I work with the two systems too. It's like I'm a quad right though, so my brain kind of works like this, but if I can see something that looks like a challenge, or there's a hard aspect, or that someone's moving through a gnarly transit, like that's still going to be playing and interacting with all of the not self dysfunction that you see in their human design chart. So everything touches everything. And so then where it also becomes really helpful, I think, is in understanding like what's actually happening for a person right now too. So, all of these 3 points above, and what I've mostly been talking about is like what's going on in a person's birth chart, right? What's happening in their birth chart. Where it gets really helpful is when you start to learn transits, and you can start to get a sense of, okay, this is like the energy a person's come in with, but this is the season that they're in right now. This is the cycle that they're in right now, so for example, you might be working with a manifester who has like, say, a ton of cardinal energy in their chart, they're an Aries, they've got all this fire, maybe they do really resonate with being a manifester, but they're in a season or a cycle that is really introspective. You know, they're in a season that could be where they're processing a lot, or they're moving through a lot of subconscious, a lot of past, a lot of maybe repressed memories and things like that. And so while they might really resonate with what's in their birth chart, right now they're in this season where they're functioning in a really different way. And I think, especially if you're someone who is using human design and you're working with people long term, you know, so like you're a coach who uses human design, especially if you're a business coach who uses human design, I think understanding the current season and cycles that people are in is so, so important, because then you can really get a sense of like, you know, when we want to be really encouraging people to like go for it versus when we might be encouraging them, or you know, asking questions that more relate to like, what, how do you actually need to look after yourself right now? Maybe it's not about going out and achieving all the things right now. Maybe you're actually in a season where you just need to take care of yourself and tend to your heart, you know, and that's okay. We all move through these seasons at different times too. The other way that that's also really affirming for people is if, you know, with transits, if someone is moving through a more difficult season, or they're moving through a season where they're just, yeah, they're processing a lot, they're integrating, they're introspective, it can be really, really helpful to give people timelines too, which is something that astrology, yeah, is really, really great at. You know, you can get a real sense. And I have found over the years that that's often one of the most helpful things I can give someone is saying like, look, I understand this is really crunchy right now. I understand you're really wanting to make things work with your business here, but I can see all of this is going on. And I think it's going to be more beneficial if you stop and you rest and know that this isn't going to last forever. Like someone's just saying, you know, being able to say to people like, yeah, this is really shit, but it's not going to last forever, you know, and you're coming out the other side of it, or you're in the hangover of that transit now, and you've moved through all of that. Like I've really found like that can be the most helpful thing. And I've literally had clients come back to me and say, like, you saved my business because you told me to stop. You know, you saying like, hey, this is really shit, and I can see you're going through all of this and you're still trying to force, and me encouraging them just to stop and go away and rest or take care of themselves or whatever might have been going on. I've had it happen several times where they've literally come back to me and said, you saved my business because of that reason. And the only reason I was able to do that was because of what I could see in their astrology and in their transits. And so this kind of ties in as well, but this is the other benefit with astrology. Once you do start getting into the transits and things like that, is like you can really get a sense of like, you know, we're all being stretched in different ways all of the time, right? It's very rare that like life is perfect in all arenas all of the time for anyone. Well, I would say that's impossible. You know, we've come here for a human experience, and we're here to evolve and grow. And yeah, and so what you can get with astrology is a real sense of like, well, this is where you're being stretched, and this is where there might be some discomfort, and this is where you're kind of having to evolve. But then there's this other area of life where things might be a little bit easier. There's this other area of life where you might be getting to like ride the wave a little bit and experience more flow. So that can be really, really affirming for people as well. And then when it comes back to, again, like the birth chart reading, like if you're someone who specializes in a specific, you know, type of reading, like I know a lot of people are starting to use human design in a more like specialized way, whether that's for like content or for marketing or for career. You know, I work with people a lot around like business and work and career, and astrology just adds, again, a whole nother layer of information around that too. There's actually, yeah, a lot of really quite like practical information we can see in someone's astrology chart about like career suitability and things like that. So we can get this like deeper insight around these, again, specific areas. And maybe it's not career, that's just the type of people I attract, but maybe, you know, if it's relationships and love, or like family and children, or it could be creativity or anything like that. Like we just get so much more information. And so I know there's quite a few astrologers here, which has been amazing. I did just want to show you this. This is for anyone who's new, who's in human design, but new to astrology. This is just like a bit of an anatomy of the zodiac wheel. I mostly wanted to show you this though, so that you understand how this is kind of different to the human design chart. And so you'll be familiar in the human design chart with the 64 gates. The gates are really just a smaller impulse of each zodiac sign. So there's 5 to 6 gates within each zodiac sign. And so where we get like a whole other layer of information with the planetary placements is that we then don't just have a planet activating a gate and a line. We have a planet activating a gate, a line, a sign, and a house too. So, you know, and this is one of the main things that's different as well with in astrology versus in human design, is this concept of the houses too. And the houses, I won't get into it tonight, but the houses all represent different areas of life. And so even just starting, yes, I'm sharing an image. Can you guys see my screen still? Yes. Okay, cool. Yeah, good. Oh my goodness. Good. I'm glad you can see it. Thank you. Yeah. So anyway, so we get more information with the houses. We can, with when someone has like a dominance of planets in certain parts of the chart, you know, so but that's like the main difference, is like the gates are these small impulses of the zodiac sign. It could be something to do with your settings, Laurie. If anyone can't see it, if you're on a mobile or a tablet, yeah, it could be something to do with your Zoom settings. And then the other thing that is really cool, you know, I think well, the other benefit that I find, and the reason I love astrology as well, is because, you know, in human design, the way that human design was delivered, it had very strict instruction that these were the planetary placements that activate gates in the body graph and create definition, right? And so what I believe, and the way I work with this with astrology, is that, you know, in astrology, there are actually so many other celestial bodies that we look at as well. We look at the angles, which are like the ascendant, the descendant, the midheaven, the IC, which really represent someone's experience with like the 4 main areas of life. And then we look at all these other like asteroids and planetoids, and you know, in astrology, like everyone knows the nodes, right? Everyone's familiar with the nodes, the north and the south node. They're the lunar nodes. They're the nodes of the moon. In astrology, you actually have nodes for every planet too. And then we look at things like points, midpoints. We look at stars, fixed stars. Like there's so many other bodies anyway. And so the way I work with this in blending the two is that those other bodies, while they don't create definition, right? So while they don't give you extra channels or change your energy type or change your aura or anything like that, they can actually still be really interesting to explore for greater context and greater nuance, right? So even starting to explore like the gates of your midheaven, the conscious and unconscious, can be really interesting. Starting to explore the gates of your Lilith. I saw someone mentioned Lilith above, you know, like all of that. So we're getting all this other information that we can kind of bring together. And the thing with blending human design and astrology is there's a way to do it that's still really respectful of both systems, you know. So I really try not to change the system, right? Like I'm not changing human design, but I look and I see like where are the patterns that I can see between the two charts, you know. And so for me, I am often looking at like, okay, here are the gifts and strengths in a person's human design chart. Here are the gifts and strengths in their astrology chart. How does that all work together and synthesize together? You know, how does it all come together? or with the not self as well, you know, like here's the not self dysfunction I can see in their human design chart. Here are the challenges I can see in their astrology. I think the gene keys are really, really, really informative in that conversation too. So I often bring in some of the gene keys as well into that. Like, what can I see here about someone's core wound, for example? And then it all just works together, right? But I don't need to change the system to do that. You know, I can just gather all that data and then have a conversation about it. Is the new astro chart based on Vedic astrology? Thank you. So the way the team have done it, which is really great, is you can choose. Like that's one of the things that they've got in the settings. So I personally use tropical astrology and I use whole sign houses. But I saw when I was doing the testing that you can choose the different calculations that you want and the different house system that you want as well. Cool. So I thought I would open up for questions. There's been a lot in the chat, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to go back through all of the chat, but if you have a question, if you can pop it in now, fresh, anything about the AstroChart software. Okay, I'm curious if connections can be made between planetary gate activations and those. Yeah, it definitely plays a part. Yeah, I don't know if you need to, the way I teach it, I don't know how, if I can explain it on a call like this, but they can be sort of separate, but something you can talk about together, right? So I would never go as deep as, you know, your sun in gate 15 with your Saturn in gate 10, and what does that, you know, or something, you know, within an opposition, which is a challenging aspect. The way I teach it with aspects is we do like the planet, we use planetary pairs essentially, which is from archetypal astrology. And so I think it can get too confusing if you try to go that deep with an aspect. Yeah, I don't know how else to explain it properly. Is the Astro chart software available right now? I believe it is. I think they launched it last week. Yeah. I noticed the ascendant was off by a few degrees for two of my family members, showing them a sign before the one they actually are. The setting is tropical Placidus. You notice that so maybe let the team know if you think it's something with their calculations, Victoria. The ones I tested were all right. So yeah, I would just let the team know about that. What books or videos do you recommend to start learning more about astrology? Yeah, one of my favorite books to recommend for people who are new is The Signs by Caroline Faulkner. It's actually like a really beautiful, like little coffee table book, but she has just really good info on like the zodiac signs, but also the planets as well. Like that's where you want to start with astrology, is getting really familiar with the signs, the houses and the planets, and then you kind of layer aspects and things like that on top of it. I tried pulling up my astrological chart, but it only gives me conscious personality. Yeah, that was something. Yeah, that's on my list of desires, Laurie. So that was something I was going, and Gitters and I have talked about this. Is having the functionality to pull up the astro design unconscious chart. So yeah, I don't know. That is something that I would love to have as well. Because it's something that I'm finding I'm working with people more and more on. And what I think really happens with your astro chart is the more you live your design and the more you get into your strategy and authority, the more you actually start to see the design astro chart coming through, right? Like, so for me, I'm a Cancer sun in my personality chart, but in my design chart, I'm an Aries sun. And if you told me that, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, before I found human design, I would have thought, no way, like, no way, that's not me at all. And now I can look at it and be like, oh yeah, I can see it, like and you're never going to see the design chart in the same way. You're never going to have the same conscious awareness of it, but you will start to kind of notice it a bit, and it can land. Kim, I'm imagining astrology would be very beneficial for reflectors to understand their uniqueness more. Yeah, because this is this is a good point. Thank you, Kim. This is one of the things for reflectors, like your astro chart doesn't change, so where in their human design chart, they have the monthly, the pattern, and then the way that they're sampling and all the things. Their astro chart paired with their variable, the deeper information in their human design, like, are the parts of them that can feel more consistent and can feel more like reliable to them. So definitely. So I'm a generator and a Libra, so air sign, will that show up differently than a traditional generator? How do you know how that will show up differently or not? Yeah, so I mean, if you go on to learn astrology, like, that would probably be the best way, but Libra is a cardinal sign, so all of the cardinal signs, and it's air, so all of the cardinal signs are initiatory. So typically, like, a generator who has a cardinal cross, which would be Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn, in any kind of variation, they're probably going to feel like they have a little bit more gumption than a fixed cross generator, who would be Scorpio, Taurus, Leo, and Aquarius. I don't have the chart. I don't have the do we want to do, I don't have the login, I don't think, to actually log in and look at it. Let me come back to that. Hold on. I'll just keep answering the questions. When embedding the calculator onto your website, do you need to separate human design astrology charts? That's more of a technical question. I believe it'll just be like an option, won't it? Yeah, Gittis team, Algus.
Hi, everyone. Just
Hi.
let me just I'm just checking with Algis, and I will reply in the chat. Just give
Okay.
me a second.
All
Thank
right.
you.
I'm a librarian. I do book astrology, books to Astrology Advantage by Astro Twins. Oh, great. I love that. How do you know what your rising sign is on the human design side? Yeah, so you would have to run, at the moment, you would have to run your design chart as its own chart. So Maya Mechanics is actually a really good platform to help you work out. But once you know your design birth date and time, then you just run that chart, and then you can see it that way at the moment. Sydney, yes, body graph chart, it will be separate. Sorry, guys. Some of these questions I won't be able to go into, like doing an example of how I would do a reading. I'm not going to be able to do on this webinar. I'm sorry. I teach that in a lot of courses, but we just wouldn't have the time. Yeah, I can send, what I can do is I have a resources list of astro books. So I can give that to the team to share with you as well, of like a whole range of astro books that you might be interested in. What I recommend for anyone who does want to learn astrology is find an astrology you resonate with, right? So I know a lot of people have mentioned Deborah Silverman. She's great. For me, it was always Stephen Forrest. Stephen Forrest, he was like, the astrologer I resonated with the most, and Mark Jones, so if you find an astrologer who you vibe with, and then just like, you can just go to town with so many, they have so many books now, a lot of them. Yeah, so you can learn a lot through books. The book was called The Signs by Carolyn Faulkner. Faulkner. If you just Google The Signs by Carolyn, it will definitely come up. Okay. Uh, okay. Amy, how do you combine purpose and astrology chart and include in human design? You include MC. Yeah, I think MC, particularly when I mean, purpose is everything, right? I think your purpose is your whole chart, is the way I teach it. I don't think anyone has come here with just there's one thing you're meant to do, right? But I think when we're looking at I more refer to it as like your evolution as well. Like your purpose is how you're here to grow and evolve as a soul, as a being. And I think midheaven is very descriptive of like work. What are you here to do for work? But for a lot of people, their biggest evolution has nothing to do with their work as well, you know? So yeah, there's a fair bit that I think goes into that conversation, Nadia. Yeah, Andrew, that's astrocartography or locational astrology, which is a whole. So once if you learn astrology, if you start learning transits, then locational astrology would be really interesting to explore. Yeah, they do. So yeah, locational astrology and astrocartography are quite complex, but yeah, it does change different aspects, but your natal chart doesn't change. Your natal chart doesn't ever change. You have the same rising sign, but different locations can bring out different expressions of that. Okay. This webinar. Yeah, so Victoria's just said there'll be a recording of this webinar be listed on your Business Mastery Hub at your body graph chart account. Cool. I'm curious why my astrology chart would be slightly different than others that I've run. For instance, in astro.com, my tropical has Jupiter in my first. It could be something if your chart looks different, what you always want to do is check the the calculations and potentially the house system that it's showing at. Like it's really common for those other platforms to default to Placidus a lot of the time, or they might default to equal as well. Oh, great. Algus says you can customize orbs. So good. Yeah, so that's something else like in astrology, or different people use different size orbs. Okay, so we go to generate chart. This might be my chart here. Oh, Gitters, I'll just mute you. Oh. Okay, so yeah, if for some reason something's showing differently here to the way it normally would, it could be that it's up here in these settings. So
more actions. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's correct. More actions into the chart settings here.
Yeah. So I would always check the house system. So this is showing in Placidus. Like I always go to whole sign. And so that changes things quite a bit. This is great. This is something I really wanted. So yeah, so that's these orb degrees are to do with the aspects. And so some astrologers will use like really tight orb degrees. Others like me will use bigger ones, 15. So that's actually really great. I hadn't seen that update. So yeah, I would come in and check that. And then I thought there was something with the house, that was like either tropical, or was it just the house systems you can change?
Yeah, right now we don't have this, so we will introduce a bit later. We have the system developed, but we don't have interface yet for the
Ah,
section.
okay. So yeah, you can change the house system at the moment. Yeah. And I think are you working on things to change like the colors and things like that, the designs and stuff?
Oh, yeah, you already can have ability to change content if you click
Mm-hmm.
on any three dots where, for example, soon you will have ability to change everything. Also,
Okay.
your account does not have that.
Okay.
Basically, you have ability to change descriptions, and you have ability to change every color, design in design tool.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, cool. So to me, it was, yeah, fairly easy to use. Let me just get the chat back. Sorry, I've got to stop the share because I've lost the chat. Okay. What is the difference between the default and the whole sign? So that's one of the things. There's different astrologers will use different house systems. There's for a long time, Placidus was the most common. It's literally just a different way of breaking up the calculations for the houses. No, so Lynette, I guess you would have like all three on your website, right? So Lynette's saying it's strictly astro chart, but you would have, it's really just a different view, So the way I'm going to have it on my website is we have the body graph chart view, and then it flips, and it's the Rave Mandala view, and then it flips, and then it's the astro charts view. Any recommendations for a live astrology class? That's actually something I'm going to be doing later in the year. Will be a live purely astro foundations class. So yeah, and we'll offer like a special discount for the body graph charts community for that if anyone wants to join. Yeah. Cool.